Hello, and welcome to Genius League Smart Bytes, powered by HPE. I'm Chris Beck. I'm a data intern at Evil Geniuses, and I'm going to be your host for Path to LCS conversation this evening. Today, we're going to be discussing almost everything that an aspiring pro is going to want to know before joining the LCS. And we're also going to be answering some questions from the audience. So if you want, just throw it into the chat, and we'll get to it either during the conversation or at the end. We are honored to have our partners at HPE present this entire Smart Byte series. HPE is our official data insight partner of EG, and we've been working very closely with the coaching staff and to create some AI and machine learning tools to analyze gameplay and evolve team strategy. We've been working them for a long time now to bring fans more data and insight, and their logo is proudly worn on the shoulders of our jerseys. You might have also seen on Twitter very recently, earlier today, that we have an HPE Futures Combine where aspiring pros can go and show off what they know to our scouts and allow us to really see what the next great League of Legends talent is going to be. We're going to talk more things HPE down the line, but right now let's introduce our special guests. Evil Genius's head coach of LCS, Evil Genius's head of LCS coaching staff, Kelsey Moser, and head scout Empyre. Welcome, Kelsey and Empyre.
Hello, thank you, Chris. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
um,
great to be here.
it's great to have you both. So we can just start off with quick introductions. Kelsey, I'm going to start with you. You can quickly recap your title and then just tell me what you do at Evil Geniuses.
Yeah, so I'm the head of coaching staff, which means I'm basically a resource or supervisory figure for the coaches as they do most of the work interacting with the players, etc. I step in and coach when needed as well. But generally speaking, I oversee both of our league teams, and I'll also be overseeing this event, this HPE Futures Combine event that we're going to be talking about later today. So.
Awesome, thank you. And then Empyre, same question. Title, what you do at EG, and even what brought you to EG.
Yeah, so I'm the head scout at EG. My main job is leading the talent scouting for EG in terms of what available players are out there that would interest EG, both League of Legends divisions and the LCS, and at the Challengers League level. And then I also assist in creating the rosters for both teams as well. In terms of what brought me to EG, this is my 4th year at EG right now, so I'm one of the longest standing members in terms of the gaming side. And yeah, what brought me here was basically the vision of wanting to be the best in the LCS and find the best talent. And I think we've done a good job of that so far, and hoping to continue doing that in the future as well.
Awesome. We can dive right into it. I think the biggest question that's on aspiring pro players' minds is just the entire topic of what is it like being a pro player. And we can start pretty high level here. Can either one of you just talk to me what a normal day-to-day schedule looks like for an LCS player?
Yeah. So effectively, they come in a bit before scrim starts. We usually have them go on a walk or do something along those lines, just to be a bit active before they play the games. Then they eat lunch before practice starts around noon, and then they'll play practice games, take a break, and then they'll play more practice games after that. And they'll be playing solo queue until pretty late that night. Sometimes they'll watch a little bit of LCK or LPL before going to bed, and then getting up the next day and doing it all over again. So we try to talk to them about their sleep, etc. So to make sure that they're getting good 8 hours in, but everything else is pretty much like playing League constantly, watching League constantly, and talking about League constantly. So.
Yeah. Empire, anything to add there?
Uh, yeah, I would add like on the kind of like the emotional and mental side of things. It's like League of Legends because of the nature of how the game changes uh, consistently and how close pros in esports are to the community compared to traditional sports, it can be like a mentally taxing experience all year round. So finding ways to, before you enter even the Challengers League, finding ways to be able to cope with the grind, the pressure, the community criticism, and how to deal with those various aspects of being a pro is very important before you like you play your first game, first scrim in the Challengers League.
Yeah, I mean, you both mentioned that it's a taxing schedule. There's a lot going on. Uh, Solo queue goes on late into the nights. I know other teams try to really get all their players on the same page in terms of like when they're going to sleep and when they're waking up. I think Cloud9 does gym sessions in the morning or something like that. Is that something you would try to do with the players at EG2? Really get them in the same circadian rhythm?
Yeah, I would say that we try to, just because it's just the default of what it's like, you know. The schedule is what it is, so very, very likely you're going to be waking up just before you come to the office. And that means that you'll probably be staying up till like 2, 3 in the morning playing. So their schedule is going to be very consistent within the team, just because everything structures around practice and playing league. And when Champions Queue was popular, obviously, like the Champions Queue hours were also a thing. But the one of the biggest things to consider also is for individual practice when you're playing solo queue, because the high elo solo queue population is so small in North America relative to other leagues. There will be specific hours where solo queue is good, and that's when practice is finished for LCS and into like that 2 a.m. time zone. After that or before that, it's not good. So those are normally the times when you are playing solo queue, and then you're sleeping after like 2 a.m. and then coming into the office to start your next day as soon as you're basically, and sleeping basically until you're called in. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Is that something that when you look at a North American Challengers League player, it's around the same schedule, or are there some differences there?
I'd say that we try to keep our NACL schedule pretty consistent. Obviously, they have less of a long year to go through because their events wrap up before big international events, so they don't have to do those. They'll have longer off seasons and things like this. But generally speaking, we try to keep NACL on the same schedule as LCS.
Cool. I'll direct this next question at Empyre first. So what are like some of the perks? I mean, there's some that obviously come to mind, but what are some of the perks of being a pro player?
Uh, for sure, like it's the same as like in traditional sports, like the camaraderie that you build with your teammates and your coaches, and the whole staff behind you. The kind of the hardships that you go through to try to problem solve to get to where you want to be together, and then obviously, working towards that end result of like winning games, improving. I think those are probably the main reasons why uh, players want to become professional, is to have that experience.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Sorry, did you want to add something, Kelsey?
So yeah, I think also um, the feeling of being part of a team is also a very valuable experience, and I feel like a lot of kids who are gamers, especially in North America, don't really get that experience from other places. Since the statistical trend is that they tend to be less into sports and other team activities like this. So getting that experience, I think, is very valuable in general. Being part of an esports team, either at your school or eventually at the pro level, is super valuable. And you can tell when players have had the previous experience of being on a team before they come to Challengers League, whether it's another esport or a sports team or anything like that. They generally have a lot more discipline, understand a lot more what it takes to get to the next level. So it's a very valuable experience, and I think that helps you kind of be better at everything that you do and as your life continues. So
Yeah, yeah. And this is also like a lot of the players' first time um, being in front of an audience, being in front of being a public figure. There's the social media, the fandom that comes along with that. Uh, do all new players handle this the same? Is there a best way to do it? How do new players usually deal with the fact that they're they're in the mouths of other people? They say other people say their names, and people might come up to them on the street and say hi. So how do new players usually deal with this new aspect of being a pro player?
Kelsey, what do you think? You've head coached a couple of teams.
yeah, generally speaking, it varies from person to person how well you deal well with it. I know some teams and coaches I've talked to, they will institute like social media bans for certain hours of the day. It's like just don't go on, don't see what people are saying, don't interact, don't um, let it get to you or get in your head. Some people kind of thrive off of the pressure or the comments in a sort of strange way. So it really depends on the kind of person you are. But I think by and large, for the most part, just always remember the most important feedback that you get as a player is going to be from your teammates, your coaching staff. So the feedback that you get from fans can at times be misdirected or not as helpful as those sources. So just always try to tell yourself that the best way to climb to the top is usually to listen to the people who know you best and who you trust to know the game best. So
Yeah, 100% agree. Like when it comes to the community, like the way they will usually assess or treat a player is, you know, how did they do in their last game or couple of games? There's no really like trend or analytical assessment of the player. So if they had a good score, if they won the game, oh this guy's insane. If they do bad, oh this guy sucks. So it's not very fruitful information to kind of like read through all those comments. So generally suggest players to, whether they played bad or like whether they've lost or whether they've won games, to generally avoid social media and like Kelsey said, um, look towards the feedback of your teammates and your coaches. That's where it's most valuable.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about um, just really listening to the people that are around you, your teammates, your coaches. Um, I've heard from a lot of players just through interviews that some of them just describe their teammates more as like business coworkers, and then some of them really describe them just as friends. How would you say that it is at EG and also just in the industry as a whole? I know like early in the days, a lot of these teams are more just like a group of friends that came together, but now maybe it's shifted more towards the business coworker type of dynamic.
I think it depends, and I don't think either or is like better. Like there are downsides to both. If you're too friendly with teammates, it might be hard for you to like see things in a more objective manner. And you might be too subjective, or you might be afraid to kind of hurt their feelings or step out of line. And then if you're too like kind of like coworkers business, then um, you might not treat them with like compassion or like enough respect, or kind of like see it as just like a you go into the office and then you play your scrims and you leave, and you don't really build on um, kind of anything like towards any kind of goal you have for the team. So I think uh, there's downsides to both versions, but it's kind of just finding a healthy balance.
So, as head scout, is this something that you look for when you're looking for new players? Just see how. I mean, maybe you're not getting them in the same room, seeing how they interact, but like just getting a sense of like how they talk, how they might get along with some different people.
Yeah, I think generally it doesn't matter to me whether they're going to become like best of friends, but what matters to me is that uh, the players synergize at some level and are able to cooperate together. For sure, because it's 5 players on one team, like personality does matter, because it's more close knit group. Um, so each personality has more weight towards what the team is working towards. So yeah, I would say that generally I think it's important to find players that synergize together at some level, and then but that doesn't mean that there are certain personalities that I filter out. I think any personality can fit into a team. It's just about the environment, the coaching staff, and the players around them that are able to kind of get the best out of that like each player.
But thank you. There are some teams that do team houses, where all the players live together, and then some where the players just live on their own in different apartments. They come to the office. What is it like at EG? And what do you think that the esports or the league scene as a whole is doing more now? Is it more of the apartment style?
It is more of the apartment and office style, I think, in general, for the majority of LCS teams. I would say if you're talking about global league scene, there are still a lot of gaming houses, as particularly in some of the Asian leagues, but a lot of teams are going into more of the office and apartment kind of setting. I think a lot of it just has to do with a lot of different things, like where you are in your life, how much experience, how independent you are, things like this. I think for younger players, it's nice sometimes to have the gaming house experience because a lot of times you're going to your first team, you've never lived outside of your home with your parents, things like this. So you're not used to having to look after yourself, or you're not used to having like other people that are having to share your spaces with you. So that experience can be super valuable for people who just like don't have an experience being responsible, renting, doing their own doctor's appointments. On some one of my teams, I had to teach kids how to like book doctor's appointments and things like this. So yeah, I think the gaming house experience can be useful for teams with a lot of young players. And the office experience is good for players who kind of have been around, sort of understand, know how to take care of themselves, things like that. I think having that kind of those kind of boundaries to let yourself kind of detach from your work for the like 8 to 10 hours when you're not just grinding league with your teammates, I think is useful.
Is this something that people that you're talking to about bringing onto the team, or any aspiring pro for any team really, is this stuff that they ask about, or do they just show up and um, they have somewhere to live and then they either come to the office or they're in a gaming house? Is this something that's even front of mind for them?
They usually care about accommodation and things like that. Um, so yeah, it's usually a question that you get asked in the interview process, or it's something that comes up or is expected to come up as a topic in the interview process.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you want to add something, Empire?
No, that's all.
Okay. So the new LCS schedule has matches on Thursday and Friday now. So that means they have the weekends off. Uh, does this change up the schedule? I think it used to be where Monday used to be the rest day. Is it now? Do they get a full weekend off? Is it a situation where maybe not just Saturday is off and then everything else is now part of the scrim schedule? What is that like now?
No, things
Yeah,
just shifted. It's just shifted towards like those 2 days, and then you just get the regular 1 day off. And I'd say the big change is what happened, regardless of the broadcast changes, moving the number of scrims from 5 games 1 block into uh, 6 games between 2 blocks. So you play 6 games in in a day, 3 games, 2-hour break, 3 games. So that's the biggest change this year that's happened in the LCS and the Challengers League. That's affected the training schedule for players.
So
Yep.
with that, oh, sorry, do you want to add something, Kelsey?
No, I just said yep. Go ahead.
So then with that change, does that mean that there's less free time for the players now to do like solo queue or whatever else they want to do with their free time? Or is it more?
In theory, it's the same. Well, less because you're playing one extra scrim game, right? It's less because you're playing one extra scrim game, so in theory it would be just a little bit less, but you do feel the impact a lot more because you're basically just 2 hours where you kind of have to figure out what you're going to do in the 2 hours, or where the team does some kind of activity together in the 2 hours, so you don't have those 2 hours to yourself either. A lot of teams would just stay until like 8 or 10 p.m. minimum anyway at night. So it's just you're still at the office during all those times. You're still probably playing League. You're still doing all those things. So you didn't have that much free time anyway in the previous schedule. But I think this schedule, the goal was to kind of almost ensure that everyone in North American teams are staying focused and getting the most out of their practice hours. So yeah.
Cool. So before getting to our next questions, I just wanted to take a quick moment to pause and welcome everyone who's just joining us right now and tuning into the Smart Bytes powered by HPE. And we'd also like to thank our official data insights partner, HPE, and the series would not have been possible without them. You can find out more about EG and how we are working with HPE using AI and machine learning to help our game strategy by clicking the link in the chat. And also, as mentioned earlier, we have a HPE Futures Combine announced earlier today. So make sure you go follow the EG socials to get more updates on what's happening on that front. All right, so this second section here is what aspiring pro players should do to improve. Kelsey, you mentioned earlier that uh, kids growing up in traditional sports, they're playing team games. They're playing soccer, they're playing football. I know I, growing up in LA, did AYSO, and that's a team soccer. But League doesn't even have voice chat. So is there a way that pro players can improve upon their teamwork and communication? And even if they do, is there a way that they can show that to the scouts when they're looking to become a pro? Maybe I'll start with Empyre here.
Um, I think so you're asking specifically about how potential pro players, like players from the amateur scene, solo queue, how can they get themselves to be noticed more by scouts?
More just how can they um, improve their communication and their teamwork because
Oh, I see.
solo queue is not the most conducive for it, especially without voice chat or anything like that. And even if
Yeah.
they do work on this communication and teamwork, is there a way that they can even show that skill to the scouts?
Um. Well, I, like there are. I mean, I don't know how many players would actually do this, but there are uh kind of like guides on how you can have like effective communication in workplace environments, and I think that can translate well to pro teams as well. Um, but generally, kind of like players learn how to communicate over time, playing on different teams and amateur and challengers and LCS, and with guidance from the coaching staff, and especially if if they have a performance coach as well, kind of like guiding them and teaching them these things as well. But if players from solo queue and amateur want to get like be get the step ahead, I would like look into just type in Google like effective communication skills in workplace or on like sports teams or whatnot. And you'll probably find guides on and like tools, kind of like things that are effective in how to create kind of conducive conversations in those environments. And in terms of like showing it to scouts, uh, like uh, you would have to like invite the scout, like you'd have to be playing on an amateur team and kind of invite the scout or invite the scout to watch like a scrim set, and the scout would be able to kind of observe the scrims and like observe the team conversations in between games.
So maybe I'll rephrase it this way. Is this something that you as a scout highly prioritize when you're looking at prospects, or are you really just focusing on uh, their gameplay and the VODs that you get?
Um, Personally, what I believe is I think any player who's talented can be taught to taught these things when it comes to like anything that's knowledge based. When it comes either if it's like communication or if it's like strategy, these things can be taught and players can get better at. So uh, I value it, but I don't value it super highly. I think the most important thing is how you approach the video game is to be the most important aspect when it comes to scouting.
Got it. And Kelsey, when they land on your team, and maybe they didn't have the background of growing up doing team games, how are there exercises? How do you work on developing this skill for these players?
Yeah. So a lot of the times you don't even know what information is relevant to be communicated. So a lot of times you give them a checklist or something along those lines. A lot of times it's a lot of telling, but really the only way that they'll learn how valuable it is to improve your teamwork skills and communication is by going through the experience of like realizing you're losing games by not having it. Like honestly, there's not really a good way to get around that. Usually, I would say it's more like initiative, and just really having the drive to not let anything on your team hold you back. And if no one is stepping up being a leader, realizing that you can or you need to, and picking up the slack on your end and giving your team a sense of direction. The biggest thing that any amateur player can improve on is just when you're communicating something, making it directional, taking ownership, saying, "Oh, we're going to do this play on this wave," and everyone be there. Be able to make that call to use your lead to go in that direction. But generally speaking, like I said, this is like Empyre said, this is stuff that a coaching staff and teammates will help you with. So first step is getting noticed basically and improving your mechanical skill in the game.
Yeah. There was a question in chat that sort of relates to this. And the question says, during scrims, do you try multiple different players as IGLs? But I guess another question to that is, are there even IGLs? Is that something that we see a lot in the league? And is that something we try to have for teams? Are we assigning certain people different roles for calling out? And is this something that you can throw out to different players to try?
There isn't usually a strict IGL rule, but usually more players, certain players talk more in certain situations. It's more about just keeping a flow of information and someone stepping up and making a plan and everyone being on the same page. Usually, one of the easiest ways to do it, and this is the most consistent I found in teams I've been in, is whoever is like doing well in the game or whoever the comp is built around from the draft has to basically communicate how they want to win on their champion that's ahead or that is the win condition. And then everyone falls in line with the plan because usually if you are playing your champion, you know what your champion needs better than everyone else. So it ends up being, depending on what composition you're playing, the win condition and the plan changes a lot. So it's kind of hard to just have one consistent IGL who knows everything that's going on at the map at all times and is always the person in charge in every single game. So, but if you do find that person, sometimes it's really easy to play. So I understand why shooting games use IGLs.
I think another
Yeah.
thing that, oh, sorry, go for it, Empire.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to like add to that. When you have someone who understands the game, like generally from game to game, like how the map should be played out, it gives the team kind of a center to rely on when the other players are kind of like in confusion about what to do next. Having that one player who's like, okay, guys, just do this, and we'll do this. It kind of centers the team and gives the team a direction.
Yeah. And then these are all things that you can work on in scrims. You can talk about uh, and try to develop. But I think one of the other major parts of being a pro that not a lot of people get until they become a pro is just playing stage matches and how like the environment just changes, how people start to act differently. Is there a way that aspiring pros can try to acclimate themselves to this before even get onto stage? Are there different methods that players use to get themselves ready, to get them in the right mindset, or just anything else that you've seen for what players are trying to get ready for stage?
Kelsey, what do you think?
Usually it's about having a good routine that works for you, that minimizes the number of choices that you have to make in the day before you actually play, because you want to basically reserve most of your energy and most of your, uh, I guess, most of the big decisions and your brain power to make the big decisions for the match, right? Or for the games. So making your routine extremely rote so that you're basically autopiloting to get to, I guess, what everyone calls the flow states, and then performing on stage in that flow state where you can make really alert and very aware decisions is probably the best way to get into a good mindset to make everything count and to shot call better, to play better, all of these things.
Anything to add there, Empire?
Uh, no, I think Kelsey put it really well there. I think just having a routine is really, really important for players.
Yeah. Then, are there any other areas that you often see with new players coming in that you would give as advice to these pro players to improve on before becoming pro?
I think generally, I would say, like I would tell players to find what makes them stand out, uh, compared to like other players, on their level. And if you if you are, if you're a 6 or 7 on everything, then you're not really special. But even if you're like a 5 or 4 in some capabilities, but you're an 8 to 9 and 10 in this one or two aspects, it's going to give your team a greater chance in winning games. So, like a easy example is like, all right, a support player doesn't really know how to lane, but he's really insane in finding like the right engage almost every game. Even though he might like uh, even though his ADC might get mad at him because he's not great at laning, he will end up giving his team more opportunities to win the game because he's so good at engaging once the game, exits the lane phase. So that's like one example is like try to uh, try to differentiate yourself in a few areas of the game rather than trying to at the start try to improve at everything.
Thank you. Kelsey?
Yeah, I think for biggest advice would be not to basically not give yourself excuses, right? If you think you're really, really good at a certain thing, it's probably still not at the peak level that it could be, right? Make sure that you're using as many resources available to improve your gameplay, and not making excuses to like not have a better routine and fix those things. Not making excuses to not like watch the best players in your role play the champions you're trying to learn, but also don't just like mindlessly copy them. Try to think like, if I were in this position, would I do the same thing? Is what this person doing objectively good? What can I learn from this situation and what happened in this particular game to improve my gameplay? And then also just playing solo queue. Yes, we all know that NA solo queue is not the greatest in the world, but the habit of playing it, being able to visualize what better players will do when you're going over your own games, all of these things will make you a better player and will put you ahead of a lot of the players who are competing with you to get those NACL and LCS spots.
Awesome, thank you. This is going to be our data section. HPE is sponsoring this event, and there has been a lot of data out there for League of Legends, and I feel like it's only been growing in terms of just the amount and also the priority that teams and hobbyists just have with League of Legends data. How much should pro players be involved in this process? I mean, you have one extreme where maybe there's pro players out there that are coding their own tools and helping them just get the ideal, perfect item setups or something like that, or the other extreme where they just they're not very familiar with data and they don't use it too much, and maybe it's just something that an analyst might do on a team. So how important is knowledge of data, working with data, something that you might look for in a up and coming pro?
I don't really consider it much at all. I think I think it's a plus if a player is very intuitive uh, about the data statistical math side of things when it comes to like itemizations um, or rune setups and things like this. Um, but I think those things should uh, be on the coaching staff and the analysts that a team has to kind of help and inform the players on what the best builds and the best like getting them all the data and stats that they require. I, like it's a plus if players are like they have like that onus to go get the data and find out for themselves, but they already have like a million things that they need to worry about and try to focus on. So it's not really a requirement for me when I'm looking at a player.
I think it's nice when the players are interested in how do I optimize my build, or what champions are the most OP in solo queue on this patch? Would they be good in pro play? Can I think about this logically and make a conclusion? I think that's always nice, but generally speaking, they're not the ones who will be playing with the spreadsheets and the tools. They'll be like, oh, hey, analyst, which item would be best here? Can you calculate the damage for me? And the analyst would be like, yes, okay, here you go.
Yeah.
So that's more it. So I think like an interest in data and understanding how data can help improve your game is a plus, but it's not necessarily something we look for initially.
Yeah. And I would say like more than like the player kind of being super involved in the data is being open-minded and not copying like like the kind of the common flaw I see at least in Western pros is copying builds or the champions or like jungle paths from Asia without like asking like why it's good or exploring alternatives. Uh, so I think having an open mind and uh, being receptive to the ideas of like coaches, analysts, or even teammates of like other things they can do is something that can open up your game and kind of give you an edge. In some certain, it's not most cases it's not going to win you games, like that one thing, but it can give you edges in certain scenarios in the game.
Got it. One of the events that we have coming up, and I mentioned earlier, was the HPE Futures Combine. And HPE has been working on some pretty cool things with AI and machine learning to use HPE GreenLake to do things like voice sentiment analysis when we were taking a look at like voice comms. So what is it that you're going to be looking for when we have this combine, what is it in the voice comms that you're looking for to mark a player that is good at communicating in the game?
So yeah, I think with the HPE tool, some of the things we're looking at is like if they're using specific words that are giving direction, right? As this we go, or like action words basically, like go or move here, or in 30 seconds I'm doing this, which is like a planning word, or I will want you to basically okay, or calling like a person in team fights, things like this, like very clear directional comms. We'll be categorizing comms into different categories in terms of like whether or not it's like informational, et cetera, and giving them feedback on the profile, the type of communication that they're doing. We can use HP's software to do that. In terms of sentiments, basically the sentiment analysis part of it is more along the lines of, can you be more positive, more alerts in games and things like this.
Are you looking for the same thing, Empyre, as well?
Yeah, I think those things are probably going to be the key aspects when we're looking at communication.
Awesome. Let's see. So when it comes to data, computer vision, AI, ML, these are all really cool new technologies with the new computing power, which we can access through HPE and GreenLake. Are there certain things that you think about in data that you think might actually be solvable now through maybe computer vision or AI or ML that before would have been too big of a task?
Can you phrase that another way? Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, um, is there like something that you've always wanted from someone working with data to be able to do that was not possible in the past, but maybe might be possible now?
No. Maybe not now, no, but I think we're working slowly towards like like a future where we are able to kind of gain more insight into the game when it comes to things like uh, draft predictions, like predicting what the opposition can pick, and things like kind of assessing the game on the level of like minion waves, things like this.
Mhm.
But I think we're a bit like we're far from being able to like realize that feature, but it's something I think lots of data analysts, especially at EG, are working towards.
Anything come to your mind, Kelsey?
Yeah, I would say the biggest one that I always tell everyone all the time is just if you can track minion wave position, you can do so much more with data than what we can currently do. That one's currently difficult because a lot of it has to do with the fact that the only real way to do that is basically by like visual recognition off of a streamed game. There's not really a way to track it in the API or anything currently. So that's always like the magic key, the 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 exciting thing.
Yeah, thank you. I also know that HPE has been making this application that looks at draft tendencies through historic data using machine learning. How would a tool like this impact draft prep for pro matches?
I guess I'll answer since I think Nasser is opening the floor for me to answer. I think the main thing that's useful for is especially historic data. Often when champions are buffed or nerfed, then that makes champions that used to be good against those champions or with those champions also a bit stronger. So historically, let's say that we frequently saw Cassiopeia played into Rise, and Rise gets buffed again. Well, Cassiopeia might be playable again. So, like a draft tool would suggest that based on historic data. If the AI becomes extremely smart and is able to kind of like mimic the opposition drafting, then you get a lot of practice for your coaches in terms of like scenarios that might pop up and prep that could be done before the match. So that's very useful.
Awesome, thank you. I guess we'll jump into this next section here, which is all about scouting. And before we get into this section, I want to give Empyre you a chance to just share your background, how you ended up becoming an LCS scout.
I first started off as an analyst way back in like late 2015, kind of just like starting off just providing data and data analysis for coaching staffs. And then over the years, kind of just grinding VODs, learning from coaches, learning from players, watching, watching scrims, watching pro games, watching solo queue, countless hours. You just kind of start picking up like trends of like what's good, what's not so good, and over time it's given me a good ability to discern whether like key aspects of what makes a player good and what their strengths and weaknesses are, and showcasing that to the teams I was on. For example, on Misfits back when they were in the EU LCS, and then later on Clutch Gaming when they were in the LCS, and then uh, in 2019 late 2019 when I joined EG. That's one of the reasons why they brought me on. Um, so yeah, that's kind of how I got to from analyst to scout. And then what was the question besides that, or is that
Oh
the
no,
most?
that was it. Thank
All
you.
right.
That's really helpful. So in a normal job interview, there are rounds of interviews, and then there's like a very expected process for how uh, these interviews go. I I don't know how the scouting process works. How does that? Is it a round of interviews? Like I'm sure there's some VOD reviews at some point. So what goes into the scouting process?
Scouting process of players, right?
Yes,
Is what
yeah.
you're asking? Yeah. Usually I source I scout from different sources, so like things like solo queue, amateur games. Preferably I like to get players POV VODs if they have them. And I just look at several of the players gameplay, whether they're from solo queue or whether they're from semi-competitive games and amateur, uh, or challengers or LCS, depending on the level we're scouting for. Um, and kind of just what we do is there are key attributes that we have at EG that we want to assess, and then we kind of rate each of these attributes, um, and then we see what are the outliers and do they have any outliers in their attributes that we think can develop them into a strong Challengers League player, or and hopefully an LCS player in the future. And once we determine that, we approach the player for kind of like an interview where we talk to them about kind of their goals, what they're looking for, uh, like why do they want to become a pro player. Lots of kind of uh, like kind of like any sort of interview that you would have in any different like job, or like a student interview for like a college is also another example. Just kind of getting to know the player and the mind of the player, and then yeah, that's like basically the two parters, kind of like assessing their skills, and then uh like assessing what they want and whether the mindset they have fits the kind of the overall um, goal that we have for the team we're building.
So is that usually the first time a player is going to hear from you? Like after all of this work looking at their gameplay, um, I don't know
Uh,
how long does that usually take, and then uh, how long until you first reach out to this player?
usually reach out to them as soon as like I want to see their POV and ask them
Okay,
for their POV VODs.
so
So
they know
pretty
like
early.
throughout this entire process that you're taking a look at their gameplay.
Yeah, yeah,
Cool.
exactly.
Yep.
Mhm.
So on average, how long would this entire process take uh, for first reaching out to them for their gameplay, and then all the way until uh, eventually maybe signing them onto a team?
Kind of varies. Um, if yeah, it kind of really varies on uh kind of it varies on the priority of the player. You know, if we're talking about like the Challengers League level, usually those are kind of those take less of a priority compared to like the LCS. Um, and then it kind of depends on how many offers they have as well, how many teams they're talking to. So it can vary from a couple of weeks to a month, 2 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it really depends on the player and the role and a lot of different factors.
And
So
there are very specific times in which we really can sign players, which are like, but unless an emergency occurs, which is like, so it'll be between splits. So, I mean, we're kind of on a schedule, so you'll have an idea of like when you're going to be heard back based on the off-season schedule that's occurring. So it's like sometimes we can't even sign a certain player until like the specific November dates. So it really is just like, oh, these are the times of year when you will be talking to scouts and doing interviews, and it usually takes about a month, or usually those periods last like a month or 2 months. So, yeah.
got it. There was a question in chat that's I think pretty related to this, and the question reads, "How does one get a tryout? I've been 1K LP for the majority of the season, and I can't seem to find a tryout opportunity." So, is this something where players should reach out to you? Like so the best way is to find someone, you'd say maybe a coach, a scout on Twitter, and they just reach out to you. What do you recommend they like put into this like initial message?
Um, yeah, they can reach out to members of an organization and kind of provide their POVs themselves and ask hey, they're interested in any tryouts or any sub opportunities that would be available. Here are some VODs of myself. Like, it would be uh, it would be awesome if you could have a look at them and maybe provide me some feedback. And then, if the org replies and they're kind of not interested, politely asking them, um, like politely asking them what they can do in the future, or what the player can do in the future to uh, be able to participate in any tryouts or any opportunities. Is there an area they can improve on their gameplay? Is it something to do with their communication? Uh, yeah, kind of like getting that feedback of why they aren't able to participate in a tryout, and then work on those aspects of that feedback and implement them for the future to improve their chances of getting tryouts.
Yeah. And I think one of the unspoken things is that there's only so many spots in LCS and LCS Challengers for any Challenger League. Um, so the other league that a lot of people might be considering is collegiate. Is this something, and this also relates to a question that came through chat as well, is the collegiate scene a big pipeline? I know not too long ago, one of the teams brought in people from, I believe, Maryville University. So is the collegiate scene being actively scouted, reviewed?
So it's like, I guess a lot of the times there isn't a huge separation between like the best collegiate players will often also play amateur. It's very stressful on time, but that's usually what happens. I have watched collegiate VODs for scouting before in the past, but I would say that the biggest thing is I think that if esports wants to be long-term sustainable, collegiate has to be more considered and more legitimized because right now the your ability to go pro is basically limited by your ability to have a support system that will let you either drop out of school or take a big gap year and no life League of Legends for all that time. And there isn't a lot of accessibility for people who don't have that luxury. So if collegiate exists, then you can actually get more doors with esports than you currently can. And so I think teams can do a good job of helping legitimize collegiate esports by using it as more of a scouting source in the future. So, yeah.
Yeah. And then maybe we can get to like the more, I guess, fun part, which is after the offer. You know, an Aspire Pro, they've worked to this point, and they finally get an offer from a team, or maybe multiple teams. What are some things that pros should maybe introspect, just think about when they're joining the teams? What are some things that you think often don't get considered uh, for these upcoming pros?
Uh,
So this is after they, they signed a contract or after they receive an offer?
After they receive an offer, yeah.
Uh, yeah, I would say the player, it's kind of like similar to choosing a college, write down the things that are most important for you, uh, for, a team, a roster to have. And it's going to be, different for every player. But, um, like just find what you think is important. And the other thing is, ask around, talk to other players who have been a part of those teams that you've received offers for, so that they can give you kind of like a review of of that team and what to expect.
Also, I recommend getting a lawyer. Maybe this one's less fun, but always have someone vet your contract for you. Um, Big fan of that. Have to say, even like both sides of the line, everyone's using lawyers when it comes to contract periods. So make sure that you're prepared.
All right. We're closing. We're coming up to the close here. So maybe I'll just open it up to both of you one at a time. Just one last final piece of advice. Maybe it's a reiteration of what you said earlier that you just want to have stuck in the minds of anyone watching and thinking about going pro. And I'll start with Kelsey.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest piece of advice is what we said just a little bit ago. If you are not getting noticed in solo queue, you just message scouts and coaches and GMs. I look at every POV VOD that gets sent to me in a cold DM. If you are a good player and you're not getting noticed, the best thing you can do is advocate for yourself. This is also true of any standard job interview, by the way. Like, if you are going into a job interview or if you're trying to get noticed in any industry, always like talk to someone who is going to be doing or conducting the interview and ask them like what they're looking for, what they should be doing to get to the position that they want to be in. So
Yep,
Thank you.
exactly.
Same thing, Empire.
Yeah, exactly what Kelsey said. And also find ways to improve your chances of getting noticed by uh, talking, like getting feedback from uh, coaches and analysts in the scene. Many people who work in the scene are want to pay it forward to people who are looking to get into the space. So like as I said, like cold DMing coaches, analysts, players, asking for their feedback and what they can do and what you can do to improve. or like improve your opportunities, you're bound to get some feedback.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us with the Genius League Smart Bytes powered by HPE. Thank you, Kelsey Moser and Empyre. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. And as we close out this panel, we want to say thank you to HPE for bringing this to life. You can stay on the lookout for more Smart Bytes events on Twitch and also the Genius League Discord. And also, as I mentioned earlier, we have an HPE Futures Combine coming up. So make sure to follow the EG follow EG on social media to just get more updates on everything on that front. Thank you again, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.